Got a lot of kale in the garden right now, and in this video I want to talk to you guys about what I do to avoid aphids becoming a big problem in the garden, because they do start to establish themselves right around this time. We're mid-July, and there's a lot of other stuff in the gardens right now. I don't necessarily need to have so much kale. It's lovely to have it in the spring. I always plant probably 4 times more than I need in the spring, just so we have lots of greens and I can start picking those plants when they're small. But at this point it's getting aphidy and I want to get rid of this stuff, but I'm going to be basically clearing out. I've got a bunch of brassicas. This entire bed is mostly brassicas. This was brassicas here, was replanted to lettuce, and so this big hairy section of red Russian kale, there was some kohlrabi in there, which is all harvested, at least most of it, and some kale. Another big section of kale here. We had broccolinis. These are all gone to flower now, so those are going to get pulled out. And then we've got another section of kale here. Now, I would like to keep some of it for the winter. However, I've already got my winter plugs in there ready. So I think what I'm going to do is pull all of this out except this patch here. And I'm going to do a little technique to strip these down, and I'm going to show you my manual way of managing them so that aphids don't become a problem. So the first thing I'm doing here is I'm pulling this stuff out, and when I'm pulling this out, I'm not actually pulling it out. That's sort of an incorrect term. I'm trimming it at the base. The reason for that is if I pull out the entire plant and you pull up that root structure, you essentially make a mess. And because we've got a lot of aphids in this kale right now, I don't want to make a mess, because if I make a mess and I get soil everywhere, then those aphids are going to get buried in the ground and they're going to be harder to deal with. Because what I'm going to do once I pull this kale out, you're going to see all these aphids that just kind of fall on the soil, and my soil is undisturbed and it's just surface level. So what I'm going to do next is move my irrigation lines out of the way there, and I'm going to bring out my little trusty hand torch, and I'm going to burn those suckers right on the surface of the soil, and that really knocks them back. And also note that I'm not composting this kale either. It's going right into my city green bin and is I'm getting rid of it. So if I lived on a bigger farm, I would put this somewhere else and maybe I'd burn it or something. But that's what I'm doing. I'm not putting it in the compost. I don't want to create more of a problem. So just doing a little burn on the soil there and getting rid of these aphids. That red Russian kale that I pulled out was getting nasty. Red Russian kale is the worst kale for aphids. That's always been my experience. So it's a terrible summer crop, at least to grow it to its full maturity. You can grow a baby red Russian kale all summer long, in my experience, and it's a 18-day crop in the summer, and you cut it a couple times and then it's done. And so it doesn't have enough time to establish aphids. But as a fully mature plant, it's the worst brassica I've ever seen for aphid pressure. Maybe Brussels sprouts would probably be worse, but it's not good. So it's good to get it out. That's why when I pulled all that out, I wasn't actually pulling, because I don't want to disturb the soil. I was going in with my pruners and I was cutting it off at the base of the soil for minimal soil disturbance, and there's aphids that are just falling off. It's quite gross, but they're all on top of the soil. Get all that stuff out. I take my little hand torch and I just burn the top of the soil and just toast all those little aphids there, and now it should be less problematic. You know, you can't totally avoid aphids this time of year, but what I'm going to do now is with this bed, once I get all this stuff out of here, again I'm just going to leave this little bit of kale here. I'll just tarp the rest of this bed, all the parts that had the kale on it, so that the aphids won't be a problem. The next step will be, once I finish cropping this out, is shaving this down, and I'll show you how I do that. What I'm also doing is I'm actually salvaging a lot of this kale. Like, I'm cutting the whole plant at the base, at least the good stuff, this winter boar, and I'm tossing anything with aphids into the green bin. I don't want that in my compost. And then anything decent enough, put it in totes with water, and then we will, I'll have my wife process that. We'll freeze it, or we'll use it for something, and not just throw all this stuff away. You can see, looking at this kale, that there's little clusters of aphids forming in here, and it's not really bad yet. You know, most market gardeners that were harvesting something like this would just clean this off with water. But right now, we've got a lot of other veg in the garden, not really that attached to this kale. Happy to have it later in the season, so I'm salvaging what I can and tossing the rest. Okay, now what I'm going to do is strip off all the bottom leaves. I'm basically going to take everything off except the top leaves that are just sprouting out, and then I'm going to blast out this area with water. Aphids are a pretty soft-bodied insect, so if they get knocked off the plant, especially if they get damaged by something like high pressure water, they most likely will not survive. So it's it's a strategy to basically just knock them back really hard, and these plants will come back by, it'll be just a matter of weeks until they're leaves again. But this is going to basically just knock back the aphid population so bad that they most likely won't make any significant recovery from this point. Having said all that, the other thing that's happening in the garden right now is I've got these beautiful Chinese cabbages that are coming along. I've got some on the other side of the garden too. And this is the time that I'm taking all this stuff out. These cabbages they're good enough now. I've got lots planted at the farm anyways, so we've got lots of storage cabbage this year. But to keep these going at this time of the year is just going to be gross. It's going to be a place to house aphids, and I'd rather not have to deal with that. Okay, so this, when I putting the lettuce here was a bit of a mistake as far as my farm plan, my garden plan went. It should have just been there. I should have timed that properly. These, she didn't really plan getting these. I've just been getting extra transplants from Wise Earth Farm, friends of mine, whenever they have them. So I had these and I put them in because my other lettuce bolted, so put it in there. So, but you know, I made a little cheat here. So here's the bonus thing. This is just improvised. I never done anything like this before, but I just kept the irrigation going on these, pinched them off with those 2-inch spring clamps, and then I had an extra header, so I put another header in there, ran a single line to it from here, plugging it into one of the drip tapes from here, and then I had some extra drip tape that I just cut up into smaller pieces to water this, so that way this isn't getting watered and that isn't getting watered, but this is. And then come fall, this so this bed will, unless there's something quicker growing, I want to put in this and that. So this bed will just stay like this until August 1st, and then that lettuce will come out, and then this whole bed will be planted to carrots. And then I've still got some extra space. I can do some more succession planting throughout the season into there, as well as I'm freeing up space. I've got some chard in here in this section that's just coming up. And then I'll also have more space here once these carrots come out. So lots of room to keep succession planting in the garden. But yeah, that took care of that kale problem and really cleaned things up. So if you guys found that video helpful, hit the subscribe button, share and like the videos, and I'll see you in the next one.